What up, YouTube? It's me, Johnny, back at it again with another video. So, with the next MCU film, The Marvels, slated to come out on November 10th, I wanted to do two things with this video. The first will be giving a brief character breakdown for Captain Marvel, played by Brie Larson, Ms. Marvel, played by Iman Vellani, and Monica Rambeau's character, played by Tanya Paris, according to Marvel Comics, of course, the way they're seen there. Secondly, I want to talk about why I feel this movie is destined to fail, in my opinion. But before I get into those two things on today, if you enjoyed the content you're listening to here, please, for me, like the video, subscribe to the page, and hit that notification bell so anytime a new video comes out, you will be alerted about it. Also, if you want additional content from me, check out my podcast by the same name as the channel. Wherever podcasts are being played, just search while you listen to our podcast and it will come up. With that said, let's dive into these character breakdowns first. Now, this video might be a little longer than I have done lately, so I do apologize in advance if it is. But I'm going to start with who is supposed to be the main star of the movie, and that's Captain Marvel. So Carol Danvers, also known as Captain Marvel, was first created in Marvel Comics back in 1968 by Roy Thomas and Gene Colan, with her first appearance in comics being in Marvel Superheroes number 13. Now, when her character was first introduced, she really wasn't a superhero per se. As Carol Danvers, she was more of a supporting character alongside Marvel, who was a Kree by the name of Dr. Walter Larson and the original OG owner of the name of Captain Marvel. Of course, that changed when her and Marvel's DNA fused after they were both attacked by a Kree villain that caused an explosion leading to this happening. After that debut in 1976, her official character came out as a superhero by the name of Ms. Marvel. Ms. Marvel, wait, I thought you said it was Captain Marvel. She will be, but to get to that point, we have to actually fast forward a few decades, filled with a ton of shenanigans around the name Captain Marvel, like Monica Rambeau having the name. Yep, that was the thing, but more on her in a second. And Marvel's son by the name of Genis Vell taking on the role. His run was short-lived though, and ended with him being killed off in 2006. And then finally, in the year 2012, Carol Danvers took on the mantle of Captain Marvel in her first comic with the name Captain Marvel issue number 1. And that was written by Kelly Sue Dimonick that we actually see today. A lot of the powers we have seen is displayed in the MCU with, enhanced strength, stamina, agility, durability, being able to travel and breathe in space, flight, and being totally immune to toxins and poisons. I know we haven't got to see that aspect of her character yet, but in Marvel Comics, she had that. And of course, the ability to, shoot photon blasts, if you will, from her hands. She's extremely powerful and in comics was a part of the Avengers and an important member of the team. With that said, let's take a look at another character we are going to see in the same movie, and that's Monica Rambeau. Now, her character was created by Roger Steen and John Romita being the artist that drew the character, and this was in the Amazing Spider-Man annual number 16 back in 1963. In Marvel Comics, she gained her powers and abilities in an unfortunate accident when she was trying to destroy an energy disruptor set by Picaro, who was a rogue asset to some guy named Professor Andre Leclerc, and once it broke in her hands, she gained powers or superpowers by getting blasted with extra dimensional energy. With her newfound powers, she was able to convert her body's mass into any form of electromagnetic energy. She gained the ability to fly, she has superhuman speed, entangleability, and not the Jada Pinkett Smith kind, but also allows her to phase through solid matter. She can also shoot energy blasts and become invisible, which is pretty cool. We might see some of those powers on display in the Marvel's movie, since we actually didn't get to see a lot of any of them at the end of WandaVision, but we will have to see. In the MCU, it appears that she got her powers from going through Wanda's barrier, but we'll have to see if they actually retcon any of the things that we actually saw to her character in Marvel Comics. She was the second holder of the name Captain Marvel, which I actually, referenced earlier. But through the years, her character has had a lot of major play in Marvel Comics. For example, she was a major player on the Avengers team, so much so that she was named Avengers chairwoman for a point of time before temporarily losing her powers trying to assist Thor during an incident when Neymar's wife lost control of her powers. But once that happened, the Avengers team was actually kind of in total disarray. So yeah, the importance of her character was heavily stated in Marvel Comics. Her superhero name went through a lot of changes after giving up the mantle of Captain Marvel as well to the original holder's son, who I mentioned just a second ago. But she went from, of course, Captain Marvel, she went to Phantom, Spectrum, and then Vampire Slayer. Okay, no, she didn't actually have the name Vampire Slayer, but she really did help Blade and Black Panther and a few others actually fight against some vampires. Marvel has some pretty wild stories, I have to tell you. But after she took on the name Spectrum, she did some stuff in Marvel Comics. However, she was never as in the front like she was at the character's introduction. Of course, she's still powerful in her own right, though. That's the basics of her character. So now let's talk about Kamala Khan's character and Ms. Marvel. This will come as no surprise to any comic book fan, but for most people who didn't know, the name Ms. Marvel has been used a few times before in comics prior to its making its way to actually Kamala Khan. And since this breakdown is about her character, I'll forgo mentioning all the other people who actually had the name Ms. Marvel. With that said, Camilla's Ms. Marvel was first introduced and created back in Captain Marvel number 14, back in 2012, created by Sana Amarant, G. Willow Wilson, Adrian Alfinan, and Jamie McClavey. In this comic, she only had a brief showing, admiring her idol Miss Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, albeit from afar, but that's the role she played at the time before gaining her powers. That came from the Terrigen Mist, which was released on Earth's atmosphere by the leader of the Inhumans, Black Bolt, and this mist could cause any human that might have powers or abilities that weren't awakened yet to actually activate. There's other impacts of the Terrigen Mist. I know they aren't positive either, but I'm going to actually cover that maybe in a later video at a future time. But as far as Kamala Khan's character goes, it actually, of course, greatly affected her because it gave her her powers that we actually saw in Marvel Comics. They are different than what we have actually seen in the MCU to a vast degree. Now, for anyone that didn't watch the Disney Plus show Ms. Marvel, let me give a real quick breakdown of these differences. I would say spoiler, but if you haven't watched that show by now, you're probably not. So with that said, let me go into it. So in comics, her abilities allowed her to stretch and augment her limbs and have advanced healing abilities. Not to the level like Wolverine or Deadpool or anything like that, but I would say think about Steve Rogers, for example, kind of like that. In the MCU though, her limbs don't stretch. Instead, she shoots this hardened crystal-like substance or stuff from her hands because she actually got her powers from these bangles, and she uses that to actually stretch. So it's really not her limb stretching, it's the crystals that she projects stretching, then she can make things out of them and stuff like that. In comics, Kamala played a few roles with the Young Avengers that I'm sure we're going to see in the MCU at some point. That team had like her, Miles Morales, and Spider-Man, Young Nova, people like that in it. She was on the Avengers themselves. If I might be remembering that wrong, I apologize, but I think she was on the Avengers. And she also, believe it or not in the storyline, merged with Kang the Conqueror to become Kamala Khan, which is wow. But anyway, she, in my opinion, wasn't that big a deal in comics, which is a good segue to talk about the upcoming The Marvels film and why I don't think this movie is going to be any good. My first reason for this is what I mentioned just a second ago about Camilla's character, and I think this holds true for Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau's character as well, which is these characters in Marvel Comics weren't that big of a deal. I mean, I know I mentioned that Monica Rambeau early on was, but later her character really wasn't that big of a deal, and so far the MCU hasn't made them feel like a big deal. Sure, Captain Marvel got her own movie and Monica played a key role in WandaVision, and obviously Camilla got her own Disney Plus show, but all that didn't make them feel like a big deal. It seemed more like they were trying to force us as fans to make us, to make them big deals and to make us care about them instead of doing it organically through, great storytelling and character building, much like they did with Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, obviously Chris Hemsworth's Thor, people like that, right? No matter what you do, you can't make people care about characters just because they are a Marvel comic creation, and everyone up to that point has actually loved most of all the Marvel characters brought into the MCU so far. My next reason ties into what I talked about a second ago, why I think this movie isn't going to do any good and it's going to flop, is with the storytelling and writing in these latest movies and projects and shows. In my opinion, they have either been below average or poor at best, and every single movie and show has felt like some hidden message or agenda being put in, which is not needed or actually wanted by most of its fans. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with female-led characters in shows or movies, but the way the MCU has been doing it since Avengers Endgame, in my opinion, hasn't been good. I know a lot of people don't like Brie Larson or even Iman's, Ms. Marvel's character in their respective roles. But I think that has more to do with how their characters have been portrayed in the MCU than the actresses themselves. With this, been rumors to get back on track here about, after this film, Brie is going to actually step down from the role because of the hate she gets for her acting playing Captain Marvel. And candidly speaking, I actually hope she doesn't. Now, before you all change your like and subscribe on this video and tell this channel to a dislike for that opinion, hear me out for a second. If you all remember when Chris Hemsworth first played Thor, his character actually wasn't that well received at first. I know in hindsight it looks like it was, but it actually wasn't. I remember a lot of people saying that it was a disaster. That's why his second film, Thor: The Dark World, didn't do good at all. But when they changed the way Thor was written in the MCU and the way his character was played and portrayed, it actually saved his character. I think the same could actually be done for Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. For me, the jury is actually still out for Iman's Ms. Marvel, but maybe we'll see, a little bit of a change to Brie Larson's Captain Marvel in this movie. Who knows? We'll just have to see. Now, if I was a betting man, though, I don't think it's actually going to, but we would just have to see. Also, for anybody out there that thinks that no, Disney's doing just fine, they can afford to lose billions. No company can afford to lose money. Or the people out there who I've actually seen online say, well, actually, a lot of the Disney projects that came out, for example, The Little Mermaid, separate from Marvel, like no, but still under the Disney umbrella, like, hey, that movie doubled what they put into production. Therefore, that means that it was a massive success. Actually, that's not true, because in the industry and filmmaking, the way filmmakers actually garner that a film is a success is by making 2.5 times what the production cost to make the movie. For example, The Little Mermaid budget was $250 million for the film. The Little Mermaid made about $561 million, which for some movies, again, would actually, if it was like a low budget film or something like that, like The Sound of Freedom, for example, that did something, actually they did more than that, but just using for an example, that would be deemed a success. With bigger budget films like this one was, when it cost so much, the goal for them was to make 2.5 times, which means that for them to break even, they would have had to make somewhere around $625 million, and they didn't get close to that mark. So that's why that movie is a flop. And all the other projects that Marvel has put out has also been a flop, which is why, again, they're so worried about this movie also being a flop. My final point is, let's face it, I think a lot of people that were fans of the MCU at one point has just simply checked out. When Phase 4 started, we had some high hopes, and Phase 4 at the beginning was actually looking, at least pretty good with shows like WandaVision and Loki, What If. Heck, even, some of the movies early on like Shang-Chi, Black Widow, and Spider-Man No Way Home, of course, were good to great. And then it seems like the bottom just fell out, and it has felt like we haven't even hit bottom yet, which is the disturbing thing. Kevin Feige and the team over for Marvel Studios is going to have to do some major shakeups and revamps to bring those folks back to the MCU. I've heard some people say that, it's burnout, but I actually don't think so. If the product was good, especially like it was in phase 2 and obviously in phase 3, I think people would actually still watch. But lately, it hasn't been, and the Marvels movie, based on the things I've heard, won't be any different. But let me know what you all think in the comments. Do you think this movie is going to flop? Are you going to actually see the movie when it comes out? Or are you just going to wait to free TV? Or are you just flat out not going to watch it at all? With that being said, though, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you all in the next video. Peace.